Hi, today I'm going to talk about homophobia and how social psychology changed the attitudes against homosexual people or the LGBTQ community. This presentation is for the class of social psychology from Keyano College, and my name is Jose Mulino. So, hostility and discrimination against homosexual people is a well-established fact. Sometimes these negative attitudes lead to a hostile verbal and physical acts against gay individuals with little apparent motivation except a strong dislike from the attackers. In fact, more than 90% of gay men and lesbians report being targets of verbal abuse or threats, and more than one-third report being survivors of violence related to their homosexuality. Although negative attitudes and behaviors toward gay individuals have been assumed to be associated with rigid moralistic beliefs, sexual ignorance, and fear of homosexuality, the etiology of these attitudes and behaviors remain a puzzle. Now, Weinberg in 1972 labeled these attitudes and behaviors as homophobia, which he deemed as a dread of being in close quarters with homosexual men and women, as well as irrational fear, hatred, and intolerance by heterosexual individuals of homosexual men and women. Hudson and Ricketts, other two authors, criticized the studies for not making the distinction between intellectual attitudes towards homosexuality, so homonegativism, and personal, affective responses to gay individuals, homophobia. It has also been argued that the term homophobic may not be appropriate because there is no evidence that homophobic individuals exhibit avoidance of homosexual persons. Nevertheless, the only necessary requirement for the label of homophobia is that phobic stimuli produces anxiety. Homophobia is a result of remnants of homosexuality in the heterosexual resolution. Whereas these notions are vague, psychoanalytic theories usually postulate that homophobia is a result of repressed homosexual urges or a form of latent homosexuality. Latent homosexuality can be defined as homosexual arousal, which the individual is either unaware of or denies. So, first, psychological studies disprove the belief that homosexuality is related to mental illness and criminality. Until the 1950s, most homosexual persons studied by psychologists, and others were prisoners or mental patients. So it was easy to conclude that these were linked. So Evelyn Hooker, she was a brave psychologist from the University of California, UCLA, began undoing this belief in the early 1950s. Her work was difficult. Gay males she wanted to test feared she would betray their confidentiality. If she did, their occupations and very lives were at risk. Neither government nor businesses would hire homosexual persons. In 1973, the American Psychiatric Association removed homosexuality from its list of mental diseases. Its recognition that homosexuality is not associated with any pathology has helped foster its acceptance. Now, in the 1990s, there was evidence of the inheritance of homosexuality, which grew rapidly, where Bailey and Pillard in 1991 compared the sexual orientation of male identical twins, fraternal twins, and adopted brothers. They reasoned that if homosexuality is shaped by genetics, more closely related people should be more alike in their sexual orientation. Their findings showed that about 70% of homosexuality may be directly attributed to heredity. Later studies concurred, although the hormones during the percentage was sometimes higher, sometimes lower. A network of genes, variations to maternal hormones during pregnancy, and their interactions may all play a part. There are perhaps multiple biological origins of homosexuality. Now, there is a study by Adams, Wright, and Lohr. There was quite an important study in homosexuality and the acceptance of homosexuality by everybody, which they basically investigated the role of homosexual arousal in exclusively heterosexual men who admitted negative effect toward homosexual individuals. The participants consisted of a group of homophobic men, which was 35 of them, and a group of non-homophobic men, which was 29 of them. They were assigned to groups on the basis of their scores on the index of homophobia. So I'll explain a little bit about this. Their score of homophobia was based from 0 to 100. There was a questionnaire and the questionnaire also included aggressiveness of the participant. So from 0 to 25, high-grade non-homophobic men. From 26 to 50, this was a score, low-grade non-homophobic men. From 51 to 75, there was a low-grade homophobic man, and from 76 to 100, there was a high-grade homophobic man. So the authors chose from 0 to 50 for non-homophobic men, and from 51 to 100 for homophobic men. That's how they separated their individuals, or their participants. The men were exposed to sexually explicit erotic stimuli consisting of heterosexual, male homosexual, and lesbian videotapes, and changes in penile circumference were monitored. They also completed an aggression questionnaire. Both groups exhibited increases in penile circumference to the heterosexual and female homosexual videos. Only the homophobic men showed an increase in penile erection to male homosexual stimuli. The groups did not differ in aggression. Homophobia is apparently associated with homosexual arousal that the homophobic individual is either unaware of or denies. An explanation of this data is found in Barlow, Sackheim, and Beck's from 1983, Theory of the Role of Anxiety and Attention in Sexual Responding. It is possible that viewing homosexual stimuli causes a negative emotions such as anxiety in homophobic men, but not in non-homophobic men. Because anxiety has been shown to enhance arousal and erection, this theory would predict increases in erection in homophobic men. And furthermore, it would indicate that a response to homosexual stimuli is a function of the threat condition that rather than sexual arousal per se. So here we can see a little bit of, sorry, I'm just going to move this over to this side. Now, in the table number 2, we can see that there was 2 groups, homophobic and non-homophobic, of 35 and 29 participants. On the heterosexual video, we see that the homophobic, they had a 90.91 response, while the non-homophobic a 0.93 response. On the lesbian video, the homophobic man had a 0.95. It was obviously higher than the non-homophobic. And for the male homosexual, we see a great increase in sexual arousal from the homophobic, but not as much for the non-homophobic. Now, however, given limited evidence that anti-gay attitudes are a true phobia, most psychologists use the term anti-homosexual prejudice. Psychologists have learned quite a bit about its correlates and dynamics. Those who are anti-homosexual persons are also more likely to be racist, anti-feminist, and ethnocentric. The strongest psychological predictor of anti-gay attitudes is the authoritarian personality, a cluster of attitudes that includes submissive attitudes toward strong leaders, a desire to punish all who violate conventional moral codes, and strong fear that conventional morality is breaking down. In summary, the acceptance of homosexual persons continues to advance, and the work of psychologists has contributed substantially. Psychologists have shown that homosexuality is not associated with mental illness or criminality. It's largely determined by heredity, and that homosexuality is related to other prejudices and to authoritarianism. Now we can see from this graph that the people who showed that gay marriage or same-sex couples should marry have increased from 1996 from 27% to 61%. Now, those who think that same-sex marriage should not be valid go from 68% down to 37%. This was from Gallup. You can look up this on my references. And if you have any questions, please comment on the section below, and I will make my best to respond to those questions. Thank you.